So, tomorrow's Christmas Eve, so this is Christmas Eve, I don't know, something like that. So, we're wrapping up the season where we recognize the birth of Christ, and, we're getting our final preparations to be with friends and family. And, for the most part, we take the past several days and we think on the birth of Christ and what he came to do, and that was our gift. I mean, if that's all we get, I mean, that's more than enough, right? And I want to take the next several minutes and talk about his second coming, okay? So, it's kind of like, I don't know how you guys are, but for me, when we have company at our house, we like a phone call, some kind of a notice. Like, hey, like for example, when Gary wants to get together, he says, can we come over? Or I want to go visit with him. I call and I say, hey, Gary, I really need to talk to you. He says, sure, come on over. Are you home? There's this exchange, right? I don't just show up at his house. He doesn't just show up at my house. And, I mean, there isn't anybody in this church that I would not have in my own home. I just would be a little upset if you just showed up, Sunday at 4 o'clock and I hear a knock at the door and you want to come in and visit and hang out. I mean, that just would not be too well with me. Yeah, there you go. So, like my mom's side of the family, they're different. They live in a small Texas town, so they just go over to each other's houses. They don't call or nothing. They just say, I'm going to go see Uncle Mario. And I'm like, shouldn't you call him first? She's like, no, I'm just going to go. He'll be there. If not, I know where to find him. It's a small town, right? So for the most part, we want to be prepared for company. We just don't want company just to drop on by. We want to be ready. And so I've titled this, the message this morning is, are you ready? And we're going to look at this parable in Matthew. And I'm going to go ahead and read Matthew 25, if you would turn there with me, verses 1 through 13. It says, and the kingdom of heaven will be comparable to 10 virgins. Is everybody there? Then the kingdom of heaven will be comparable to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were prudent. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the prudent took oil in a flask along with their lamps. Now when the bridegroom was delaying, they all got drowsy and began to sleep. But at midnight there was a shout, behold, the bridegroom, come out to meet him. Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the prudent, give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the prudent answered, no, there will not be enough for us and you too. Go instead to the dealers and buy some for yourselves. And while they were going away to make the purchase, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. Later the other virgins also came, saying, Lord, Lord, open up for us. But he answered, truly I say to you, I do not know you. Be on the alert then, for you do not know the day or the hour. Now, we're going to back up to Matthew 24 and give this a little bit of context, because, so this is a parable. Now, I would define a parable as an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. That's just the way Jesus taught. He told stories. It's kind of like today when we want to make a point, we tell a story. Maybe not, a story like this, but through life experience, we tell a story to prove our point. I've had many conversations with Bob Paz sitting in his office, drinking coffee, and we're talking about life, and he tells me stories and to bring, get his point across. And that's certainly what Jesus was doing here. He was trying to reveal something, and we're going to look at that. But why was he saying this? So we're going to back up to Matthew 24, if you would turn there with me, 1 through 3, the verses up there. So it says, Jesus came out from the temple and was going away when his disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. And he said to them, do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone will be left upon another which will not be torn down. As he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So what Jesus was talking about here is, they're showing him the temple, and it was, I'm sure it was very beautiful, very extravagant. It stood there for, I read, several hundred years. And he said, all this, it's not going to be here anymore. It's going to be destroyed. And that happened in 70 A.D. And let's see. So the disciples certainly had questions, because as soon as he said that, they were like, whoa, time out. I mean, this building's been here for a long, long time. What are you talking about? And so they're like, what's the sign? They're wanting the sign. And so, if you read the rest of Matthew 24, it doesn't give them one sign, but several signs. He's talking about earthquakes, famines, all these things. Going down the list, he gives them all these signs. And over the centuries, people have had questions, and it's you talk about, the rapture of the church, and, that's debated, among theologians, and we're not going to certainly debate the timing, but we can be certain that the event will happen, because there's no way around it. I mean, he said he was going to return, right? He says it. Is this thing not? Okay, there we go. So there's no debating that. He said he was going to return. And over the centuries, I'm sure everybody here, who's the oldest person in this room? Anybody? Who's that? Oh, bless your heart. How old are you, ma'am? Can you share that with us? I'm 32. 3 times that. Okay. So, and I'm sure, as long as you've been alive, you've heard sermons regarding the coming of Jesus coming back, and it's been studied, talked about, and some have even gone to an extreme. Jesus said, I don't know the day or the hour, right? So if that's what it says, well, then nobody knows the day or the hour. But somehow we have some people that they want to say, well, I know when Jesus is coming back. So a couple of years ago, there was this guy in California. He was a radio host, and he's like, I've looked through the scriptures, and he's looking at, numbers and all these things, and, Jesus is going to come back. He gave a date. It was like October 25th, 2010 or something like that. And he got a massive following of people that were like, this must be true. They obviously don't read their Bible or go to Sunday school. And so these people were quitting their jobs. They were investing all of their money in buying these campers and caravanning across the country, telling people that Jesus was going to come back and you need to be ready, right? And in fact, I remember we used to live over here in Atascocita, right by 1960, and I remember I was, hearing about this, and a couple of days had passed, and I'm driving to Walmart, and there's people out there with the big megaphone, and it was these people, And I'm like, I'm kind of laughing. I'm like, no, it doesn't say, it doesn't list a date. It doesn't work that way. And then, you have, doomsday preppers and stuff like that, and they're missing what I'm about to share with you, because what did Jesus have to say about it? First thing he said was, I'm coming back. He didn't say when. But what else did he say? And then back in 1988, there was a book. It was called 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back in 1988. And the reasoning for that was, Israel was established as a nation in 1948. And there's that verse where Jesus says his generation will not pass. So they're like, well, 1948, generation's like 40 years or something. So they're like, 1988, and people were maxing out credit cards and just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So, man, did they have some bills to pay, I tell you what. I was real big several years ago on studying Bible prophecy. If you named an author, I probably read a book or something on that person. And I remember there was, it was back in about 2009, I think, and there was this book. It was online. It was like Bible prophecy for today, something like that. So I, filled out my information. I got in the mail. So I'm reading through this book. And I'm reading, and I'm like, well, it's very compelling, It was saying all the right things, right? And then the author got me, and I was like, what? He says, in Revelation talks about these two witnesses, right? This guy from Idaho or something was like, in his book, he says, I'm one of those two witnesses. The other one's going to come later, and I'm like, I'm throwing this trash away. So I knew enough because, I spend my time in the Word, right? And what happens is, and what was the lesson there? The lesson there was, you don't give books authority over the Scriptures.
That's right.
And there's a lot of teaching out there, and you ask them, well, where's your source? Well, Bill said, well, that's cute that Bill said that, but is there anything here that says what Bill said?
Yeah, right.
Well, no, there's not. Well, then there's no, that doesn't matter. It's irrelevant, it's inconsequential. And then, you have these, doomsday preppers and stuff that are, stocking up ammo and food and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, I'm not going to waste the money on that because I'm not going to be here. Don't get me wrong, bulk buying is good. If you have a large family, I have 4 kids, so we buy in bulk, do we not? But not that much bulk. So, like I said, he didn't give him just one sign, he gave him many. But what I gathered from the parable that I'm going to share with you in a minute, I just wanted to kind of back up there, is timing was not as important to Jesus as the disciples being in a state of readiness. Again, in the book of Acts, they asked him if he was, because he rose from the dead, and for 40 days he was talking to them, and so then the disciples were like, okay, so are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel now? And he's like, no, it's not for you to know times and seasons, right? And then he talked about, Acts 1:8 about being an effective witness. So Jesus, his response was not for the disciples to be concerned with the timing of his coming, but to be prepared and, be about the Father's business. And there in Acts, maybe they misunderstood because some of these disciples were zealots, right, which were revolutionaries, and I've shared this before, and they're wanting Jesus to, conquer the Romans and, give them their kingdom back. And I read somewhere that when Judas betrayed Jesus, he was possibly, it doesn't say this is why he did it, but he was possibly trying to force his hand because he saw the power, he was around, he saw the miracles and stuff, so he's like, surely if I get him in front of Pilate, he's just going to strike everybody dead or something, but that wasn't the plan, that wasn't the purpose. So he answers in this parable about his coming, and what is our response to him saying these things. Now, the 10 virgins all knew the bridegroom, and they were part of the marriage feast. They were all invited to attend the party, right? They all knew him, right? So when I was reading this, I've got these few points here, and God has an open door policy.
Yes.
Now, he wants to be in relationship with as many people who will come to him.
Amen.
But what happens? He gives us free will, right? So some people, I've had conversations with people in the past, and they're like, well, I'm not ready to give my life to Jesus yet. Maybe when I'm older, or I'm just too busy having fun right now. I don't have time to buckle down and go to church. So there will be some who will be ready to meet the Lord, and some who will not. And again, you talk about just being ready to meet the Lord, okay? Are we talking about the rapture? Should we be ready for that? Yes. Should you be ready to go at any moment, through the grave, like he was saying? You should be, right? Every morning before I leave, I kiss my wife, I kiss my kids, I tell them I love them, and I'm trying not to cry. And I'll see you guys later. Anytime I go to the store, I say, I love you, honey, I'll see you in a minute, and I go. Now, I don't live paranoid thinking, I'm going to die today, and that's not the case. I'm just prepared that if something were to happen, I would know that I left knowing that I told her I loved her. And, sorry. And, because we don't think about, well, we think about tomorrow, but what we don't think about is today, is what if all I had was today? Because, I mean, in all reality, tomorrow's not promised to anybody. We all woke up this morning. There's a lot of people that didn't. And I don't want to put a damper on your Christmas, but but what I want to say is that should make you appreciate your loved ones, your family, because, do we know how much time we have left? We don't. I can't tell you Jesus is coming back tomorrow after lunchtime. I can't do that. It's just silly for people to do. And this isn't meant to scare anybody, but just to be aware that we should be ready. In season and out of season, like we talked about this morning. And verse 5, the bridegroom, he just showed up out of nowhere. There was no save the date card or anything like that. It was, I'm just going to show up at your doorstep, and that's that. And so, what does that tell me? We're on God's time clock. Not our time clock, we're on His time. So, what does that mean? Well, it says, my ways are not your ways, my thoughts are not your thoughts. So, we're over here trying to, and it's sad, and it's almost funny to me, at least. We've got this all figured out, and the reality is, we're not going to get it all figured out this side of heaven. And as far as events that are happening in the world and things like that, and I pay attention to the news headlines and current events and things like that. But I'm still living my life, still enjoying my wife and my kids, and we're still going to the park and stuff like that. The other night we sat outside and started a fire, and it was great, good old time. The stock market went down 1,500 points this week. They're saying it might go below 19,000. I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about living my life, telling people about Jesus that I come in contact with each day, and just being prepared. And that's not to scare anybody or to be paranoid, I might die today, or Jesus is going to come back next week. I have this, I need to get all the fishing in that I can. I'm sure there's a big pond up there somewhere with Peter, and you can go fish with those guys, right? But, so we're on His time clock. And, He knows better than I do, so I'm just not going to worry about these things.
That's right.
And the events will be so sudden, that's why we should be prepared, because He just showed up, and we need to be ready.
Amen.
And the last couple of points here, this stems from, we've had a heavy conversation the last, week or two about these things, eschatology, end time events, and so Brandy's asking me all these questions, and I'm like, why are you asking me? I didn't know anything. Ask Gary. So that forced me to go back and read on some of this eschatology, these end time events, right? And so I'm reading Matthew 24, and I'm like, okay, well, He said this, and then I'm reading Matthew 25, and I'm like, oh, He said all that, but then He said, don't worry about it. It's basically what He did. It's basically what He said. But in this parable, 25:7, it says, then all those virgins rose, trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the prudent, give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the prudent answered, no, there will not be enough for us and you too. Go instead to the dealers and buy some for yourselves. Our admission is not based on the work of others. What does that mean? I'm not going to get to heaven because he's going to heaven. I'm not going to piggyback on Gary and get into heaven because he can't carry me. And that's, Jesus was stressing that through this parable here that I'm responsible for me. Mike's responsible for Mike. Our kids are going to get old enough to where they have a decision to make and they're going to be responsible for themselves. And that's what he was saying. what I do, and I'm trying to set the best example that I can for my kids, but they're going to have a decision to make. And I can't make it for them. They're going to have to make it themselves. You know, Noah got baptized the other day, and he had talked to Brandy a while back about, I want to get baptized. And do you know what that is? He said, yes, I want to get baptized. I want to follow Jesus. I said, well, Amen. Let's do it. So our admission is not based on the work of others. 10 through 12 there, it says, and while they were going away to make the purchase, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, but the door was shut. Later the other virgins also came, saying, Lord, Lord, open up for us. But he answered, truly I say to you, I do not know you. So our entrance is dependent on relationship and not rules. They were going to go do the stuff quickly so we could go. But I would say that the others that already had the oil in the lamp were doing it out of relationship to the bridegroom. They knew that, well, he needs me to do this so I can follow him and be ready. And the others had a little bit of oil, but not enough. So what does that mean? Going to church once a year? Praying when something bad happens and not praying any other time? I don't know. I mean, what could that possibly mean? Many things. But I think that what he's stressing here is relationship and not rules. Why do we come to church? Because we want to? Or because we have to? Because my wife made me, my dad made me, my dad's a pastor, there's a variety of reasons, right? But why do we do what we do as Christians? Why? Is it a social thing? Because that's what's, I don't want people to think I'm a bad guy, so I go to church every now and then. Why? Why do you come to church? Where's your relationship this morning? And that's what he was saying here. I'm going to let you in because I know you, and you know me, and we converse from time to time, all the time. You're reading my word. You're becoming more like me. You're a disciple, right? There's that word that people don't like a whole lot, maybe. But our interest is dependent on relationship and not rules. In verse 13, it says, be on the alert then, for you do not know the day nor the hour. So, I don't think he was saying this to scare anybody. I think he was just being honest. I'm going to go. I'm going to come back. You don't know when. It's going to be like, surprise. And we just need to be ready. I just hope I'm not in the shower when it happens. That'll be awkward. It'll be awkward. Be very awkward, I tell you what. So we should live a life. What this tells me is we should live a life with the end in mind. Yes. Okay. Jonathan Edwards once said, I think I just skipped all my other points on that other slide. Okay, there we go. Live a life with the end in mind. Jonathan Edwards, he was around during the Great Awakening, right? And he said this. He said, stamp eternity on my eyes. Now, he was going off evangelizing, and he was living his life with the end in mind. Meaning, I need to tell people about Jesus. I don't know how much time I have left on this earth. I don't know if Jesus is coming back in my lifetime or not, but I need to be prepared as if he was. And, you've heard that saying, live each day as if it were your last. I think if we really did that, we'd be much happier. Yeah. I've been thinking about all these things, and that's why we made the fire the other night, just to be honest. Because honestly, I didn't want to do anything. I'm working in the warehouse, and I get tired, and I just didn't want to do anything. And the kids are like, Daddy, can we do a fire? And I said, yes. So they went out and got their little sticks out in the yard, and we made a fire, and it was a lot of fun. But if you live your life with the end in mind, I think you'll find yourself much happier. Because it's not meant to scare anybody. I think he was just saying, I'm going to go, come back. I mean, obviously we have a job to do. He's the Great Commission. If you read in the book of Acts, he said, you know, you receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you shall be a witness to me, you know, wherever you go. And if we live a life with the end in mind, with eternity stamped on our eyes, like Jonathan Edwards said, I mean, I think we'll find that our life will be more fulfilling, and doesn't matter what happens on Wall Street. Doesn't matter what happens on Capitol Hill. I mean, it does matter, but I mean, should it go way, way south tomorrow? I mean, you know, my hope is in Jesus. It's not in our government. And I just wanted to remind you of that yes, he's coming back, and we just need to be ready. And if we live our life in a state of readiness, and we're not just be prepared, be ready, be mindful of that, I mean, I don't know, I think we'll be much happier. Yes. And not less worried about everything else that's going on around us. So, Nathan, where's Nathan? Nathan's not here. Could somebody play guitar? There you go. Just come up and play something lightly. And I don't know where you're at this morning. I mean, it's not my job to go around and, you know, take some kind of survey and determine whether you're in right standing with God or not. It's not my job. And maybe you would say that, well, I'm ready. I love God. I love people. I love my family, and I thank God for what He did on the cross. I thank Him for His birth and coming into the world, which is what we're celebrating during this time. But maybe you have loved ones, friends, co-workers that don't know about Jesus. You know, maybe you want to pray for them. If not, talk to them, you know, at some point. Because the reality is, I don't know what's going to happen when I walk out that door, and you don't either. Anything could happen. And I want us to remember that it's about relationship with the Father. Yes. And maybe you would say, well, I don't know if I'm quite there, but I want to. You know, I'm so busy with life and things happen, but I want to make more time for God.